Chapter 21. Kicked. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Song Ling hesitated, unsure whether he should speak up or not. However, Gu Dai and Su Ting didn't care about Song Ling's struggle, not even giving him a glance. Gu Dai looked up at Su Ting and said, "I'm so sleepy." As soon as she finished speaking, she yawned. Su Ting quickly replied, "I'll take you home to rest." "Okay." Gu Dai obediently nodded, then opened her arms for Su Ting to hold her. Initially, he intended to carry her on his back, but he didn't expect that he could carry her instead. Su Ting's face broke into a bright smile. If he were a poppy, he would definitely be wagging his tail now in happiness. Su Ting reached around her and gently lifted Gu Dai into his arms. Song Ling had just thought of a reason to speak, but before he could say anything, he saw Su Ting's actions. His eyes flickered, slowly turning red. Song Ling gritted his teeth and said, "I knew you two were together long ago. I didn't expect Gu Dai to be so capable, hooking up with another man before the divorce. Let me tell you, there's not just you around her. I've seen another man with my own eyes. Be careful not to become a backup." Su Ting originally didn't want to bother with Song Ling and planned to leave directly, as Gu Dai was sleepy and couldn't be delayed. However, he didn't expect him to say such things about Gu Dai. Su Ting looked at Song Ling with an unfriendly expression, his face growing more unhappy. Song Ling also stared back at Su Ting, only to realize that he was actually a few centimeters shorter than Su Ting. With this realization, his imposing manner dissipated, and his gaze faltered. Nevertheless, Song Ling still tried to stare at Su Ting as if he could erase his previous hesitation. But Su Ting didn't give Song Ling the chance to keep staring at him. He directly kicked Song Ling. Caught off guard, Song Ling was kicked to the ground. He was struggling to stand up, and his response was that could only stare at Su Ting with all his force. Su Ting's movements were smooth and graceful. Although he was holding Gu Dai with his arms, he controlled himself very well. Even with such a big movement, he didn't wake Gu Dai, who was sleeping in his arms. Facing the intense gaze, Su Ting was not afraid but responded to Song Ling's previous words, "Not to mention that there is only one man by my sister's side, even if there were 100 men around her, I'd be willing to line up and wait for her. After all, not everyone has the chance to be by her side. For example, you won't have that chance in this lifetime." After Su Ting left these words behind, he carried Gu Dai away without looking back. Song Ling angrily pounded the ground and gritted his teeth while he watched them leave. Under his breath, he muttered, "No chance to line up. What a joke! Even if I were to die in this life, I would never like Gu Dai, let alone line up for her." Song Ling regained his rationality after the sentence. He looked around and noticed that many people were watching him. Realizing this, he was so furious that his face turned red, and he couldn't help but shout, "What are you looking at? What's so interesting?" Chu Min returned after making a phone call, only to see Song Ling shouting these words. While he tried his best to contain himself, in the end, he couldn't help but walk over, feigning surprise. "Wow, young Master Song is such a hygienic person, even lying on the ground to wipe the bar's floor." Song Ling glared at Chu Min, his teeth gritting in a state of rage, "Don't be so smug. Gu Dai was just taken away by Su Ting, and she was even asking him to hold her." As he said this, Song Ling kept watching Chu Min, wanting to see his angry reaction. However, things didn't develop as Song Ling had imagined. Chu Min indeed had a significant emotional reaction, but he wasn't angry, just shocked. "What? She was taken away by that kid Su Ting. I only left for a short while." Chu Min turned around and walked towards the bar's entrance. However, after a few steps, he seemed to think of something, paused, and turned back to look at Song Ling. Song Ling noticed Chu Min's gaze and even felt danger. Before he could react, Chu Min had already approached him and kicked him. "Ouch!" Song Ling cried out in pain. He was very close to being able to stand up after the kick, but now Chu Min added another kick, he collapsed back to the ground. Chapter 22. I missed you, sister. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Chu Min left, his steps were light and brisk, signs of an extremely good mood. Especially since he had been thinking about when, and now the opportunity had just presented itself. However, Chu Min felt a little depressed when he thought of Gu Dai being with Su Ting at this moment. How could such a big event happen while he was just away for a short phone call? But it was better that she was with Su Ting, at least it was safe and not like the sudden disappearance 3 years ago. Chu Min still felt scared when he thought about it, and he felt that he would never forget the sense of loneliness in his life. The next morning, Gu Dai opened her eyes in a daze, and a pleasant voice came to her ears, "It's still early, sister, you can sleep a bit more. When breakfast is ready, I'll come to wake you up, alright?" Gu Dai's brain hadn't started working yet, and she subconsciously replied, "Okay," before slowly drifting back into sleep. When Gu Dai woke up again, she felt a little bewildered, looking at the unfamiliar surroundings and Su Ting in front of her, she was a little dumbfounded. Su Ting's facial features were clean and sharp, his eyebrows and eyes didn't seem to carry a lot of emotions, and when he looked down, it was possible to see his thick and long eyelashes, and a small mole on his high and straight nose. When his lips were slightly pursed, his entire expression looked aloof and indifferent. However, Su Ting was smiling at this moment, his smile was bright, which made the distant feeling completely disperse. The 2 small canine teeth gave him a lively and particularly well-behaved appearance. Especially when Gu Dai heard Su Ting say to her, "Sister, it's time to get up and wash up. I've already prepared breakfast. I don't know if it suits your taste. If you don't like it, I'll go learn how to make something else." As Su Ting spoke, he was a little nervous, his eyes slightly evasive and not daring to look at Gu Dai, and his fingers constantly rubbing the hem of his clothes. Gu Dai noticed and couldn't help but smile, then replied, "Okay, I'll try it." She was already prepared for the food to not taste good, but to her surprise, after she took the first bite, she found that she had worried too much because Su Ting's cooking was really delicious. In a short while, Gu Dai had eaten several bowls in a row, and finally burped contentedly. She praised Su Ting, "Delicious. Very delicious." Su Ting scratched his head, in a shy voice, he said, "As long as sister likes it. By the way, if there's anything else you want to eat, just let me know. I'll make it for you next time. If I don't know how, I can learn right away." "No need, I'm not picky," Gu Dai waved her hand and told Su Ting. However, Gu Dai didn't expect that after saying this, Su Ting still stared at her expectantly. Gu Dai felt something was off and asked with confusion, "What's wrong?" Su Ting lowered his head, eyes on his toes, and quickly said, "I just returned to the country yesterday, and I'm staying in this villa owned by Zhang Jiang, but he only allowed me to stay for a few days. After that, I'll have no place to live. Can you take me in, sister?" After finishing, Su Ting seemed afraid that Gu Dai would refuse and quickly continued, "I'll cook for you every day as payment, is that okay?" "Sure." Gu Dai agreed without much thought. She was worried that she would only be able to enjoy this meal and not have such good food in the future, but Su Ting took the initiative to ask. Gu Dai said, "Coincidentally, I've got my eyes on a villa and plan to move. I'll leave a room for you when the time comes." Su Ting didn't expect Gu Dai to agree without hesitation. He raised his head in surprise and quickly said, "Thank you, sister." You're welcome," Gu Dai waved her hands repeatedly to signal him not to worry. However, she suddenly thought of something and asked with curiosity, "Did you come back right after receiving the phone call?" "Ah. Yes," Su Ting originally intended to keep it from Gu Dai, but he didn't expect her to guess it right away. So, he had to answer honestly, "I wanted to come back early for the jewelry advertisement, but most importantly, I missed you, sister." Gu Dai was stunned for a moment, but she quickly recovered. She looked away and said, the endorsement is not urgent. If you have other things to do, go do them first. Su Ting immediately refused without hesitation, no, sister's matter is the most important. Besides, I've already asked Zhang Zheng to cancel my other arrangements, and rescheduled everything for half a year later. Chapter 23. Get back here right now. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Since Su Ting already said this, Gu Dai had nothing more to say. She agreed, alright, why don't we go to the company and sign the contract now? Is that okay? Sure, Su Ting agreed without any hesitation. After agreeing, Su Ting thought of something. His eyes started to drift, and he spoke in a quiet voice, Sister, your phone rang this morning. It was Chu Min who called, but you were asleep at the time, so I answered instead. He said he had already informed Special Assistant Lin, and you can go to the company later today. Alright, Gu Dai nodded in agreement. Su Ting's eyes brightened, and he asked excitedly, Sister, you don't blame me for answering the phone without your permission, do you? Gu Dai was taken aback because she hadn't thought about that at all just now, so she shouldn't blame him, right? She thought about it, then shook her head, and honestly replied, No, I don't. Hee, Su Ting couldn't help but started to giggle after he received Gu Dai's assurance. Gu Dai didn't know why he was giggling, but seeing Su Ting's smile made her feel better. Then she thought of something, if I don't have to go to the company in the morning, I'll take the chance to do something else. Yesterday, Gu Ming reminded her that they were still living in the villa where her parents used to live. Now that she was back, it was time to sort things out. Sister, can I go with you? I just returned to the country and am still a little unaccustomed. I don't have many friends here, so if you go out, I'll be left alone in the villa. As Su Ting spoke, his voice became more and more aggrieved, quieter and quieter. Originally, Gu Dai wanted to refuse, as she was not going out for fun. But she couldn't help but picture the scene he described and felt a bit sorry for him. After a moment of thought, Gu Dai agreed, alright, we can also stop by the company later to sign the contract. Su Ting nodded repeatedly, okay. Before leaving, however, Gu Dai had one more thing to deal with. She took out her phone and sent a message to someone. At the hospital on the other side. Brother Song Ling, what happened to your leg and face? Jiang Yu looked at the man sitting in the wheelchair in front of her, not only with bandages on his leg but also on the left side of his face. Song Ling stiffened, especially thinking about the scene that happened last night. His face turned dark again. He didn't expect that Jiang Yu would see him in his current state. It was all Zhao Xian's fault for arranging him to come to this hospital. I will deduct his salary when I get back. If Zhao Xian knew Song Ling's thoughts, he would definitely cry out that he was innocent. Song Ling suddenly called him at midnight, ordered to be immediately picked up from the bar and take him to the nearest hospital. And the hospital where Jiang Yu was now happened to be the closest one. After Song Ling realized that Jiang Yu was in front of him, he quickly controlled his emotions and said, I had a little accident yesterday. Song Ling didn't want to talk about the details and even didn't want to recall the incident. Seeing Song Ling's appearance, Jiang Yu tactfully didn't mention the matter again. Instead, she smiled and said, shall we go for lunch together then? Seeing that Jiang Yu didn't ask further, Song Ling subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief, ignoring the slight reluctance in his heart, and agreed, all right. But just as Song Ling agreed, his phone rang. It was a call from his grandfather, Song, and Song Ling quickly answered. Before he could even speak, he heard an angry roar from the other end, you actually divorced Gu Dai. Get back here right now. Song Ling had just agreed to have lunch with Jiang Yu, so he refused, Grandpa, I have something to do right now. However, Song Min didn't listen to him and directly said, what could you have to do just after leaving the hospital? I'll give you 10 minutes. It's up to you. Song Min hung up the phone without giving Song Ling a chance to refuse. Song Ling had no choice but to say to Jiang Yu, I'm sorry, I have to go home. Next time when I have time, I'll accompany you for a meal. Song En's voice was very loud. Even without being on speaker, others could hear it, let alone Jiang Yu, who was standing close to Song Ling. She heard the conversation clearly but pretended not to have heard it and said understandingly, "It's okay, brother Song Ling. If you have something to do, go ahead and take care of it." Chapter 24. Money is not an issue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. However, after Song Ling left, the smile on Jiang Yu's face slowly disappeared, along with the smile was the affection in her eyes. She took out her phone and dialed a number. The other side answered quickly, "Hello, do you have any news to report on?" Jiang Yu looked at her nails, spoke slowly with a hint of threat in her voice, "I know you are the most powerful paparazzi in the country. I will send you a photo later, and you should push this news to the top 10 searches. I hope you won't disappoint others' expectations of you." Paparazzi responded, "Whether I disappoint or not depends on how much money you're willing to offer, Mississippi." Song Ling had given Jiang Yu a lot of money this time, so she didn't care about the cost. "Don't worry, money is not an issue." The paparazzi felt reassured by the response and sent her a bank account number. Jiang Yu quickly transferred the money, eager to see the subsequent effects. Originally, Jiang Yu didn't want to do this, but she didn't expect that Song Ling had already divorced Gu Dai, but he did not announce the news of the divorce or introduced her to the public. She couldn't help herself, so she contacted the paparazzi. After all, she didn't want to be an unrecognized woman by Song Ling's side. Most importantly, without a proper status, she couldn't use the assets of the Song family. At this moment, Song Ling had already arrived home at an extremely fast speed. When Song Ling saw the old man sitting in the chair in front of him, he called out in a quiet and timid voice, "Grandpa. Grandpa. You still remember that I'm your grandpa. You didn't even say a word about a big matter like a divorce. Do you have any respect for me?" Song En slammed the table in anger and started coughing uncontrollably. Song Ling was anxious to comfort him but couldn't walk over because he was in a wheelchair. He could only watch and say urgently, "Grandpa, please don't be angry. Don't hurt your health." As Song Ling's words fell, Song En became even angrier, coughing more violently. After a long time, he finally calmed down. "If you don't want me to be angry, go and remarry Gu Dai." "That's impossible." Song Ling refused immediately. He had finally divorced Gu Dai, how could he possibly agree to be with her again? Not to mention that he didn't like her, more importantly, there were several men around her. Just thinking about it made Song Ling annoyed. It must be that those men were blind to be attracted to someone like Gu Dai. What a resolute, impossible. Is it because of that woman named Jiang Yu? I'm telling you, as long as I'm alive, that woman will never enter the Song family's doorstep. Song En became more livid, even smashing his favorite inkstone to the ground. Song Ling subconsciously retorted back at Song En's words, "Yaya is great. She's gentle and kind. Gu Dai is incomparable to her at all. Especially since Yaya only cared about him and had only him by her side, she was without all the messy things." Song En didn't even want to look at him after he heard his response. Instead, he spoke earnestly, "Gentle and kind. Would Jiang Yu break up with you and go abroad to study when our family was on the verge of bankruptcy if she were gentle and kind? Don't be fooled by others." Song Ling didn't take Song En's words to heart at all. Song En said, "Gu Dai is such a good child. There is no reason for you to not like her. You will surely regret today's choice in the future. If you come to your senses now, go find Gu Dai while she still likes you and ask for her forgiveness, otherwise, you will never have a chance." "I won't. And I'll never regret it." Song Ling still firmly refused in the face of Song En's words, "Grandpa, you can't force me to be with her just because Gu Dai saved you. It's a new era now, and you can't control my marriage. Since I can't persuade you, just wait and see if you will regret divorcing Gu Dai now." Song En said so much, but he didn't expect Song Ling to remain stubborn, so he had to give up. After hearing so much, Song Ling couldn't hold his emotions in any longer and blurted out something he thought was humiliating and didn't want to admit. Is there no possibility that Gu Dai wanted a divorce? Chapter 25. I care. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Gu Dai wants a divorce. Song Ling was stunned for a moment, as he hadn't considered this possibility before. However, after he thought about this possibility, he quickly accepted the fact, Gu Dai likes you so much, and now she's divorced you. This can only mean how poorly you treated her. It also proves how much of a failure you are as a husband. When Song Ling heard that it was Gu Dai who wanted a divorce, he didn't want to talk to Song Ling anymore and waved his hand to signal Song Ling to leave. When Song Ling saw Zhao Xian coming in to push Song Ling's wheelchair, he remembered that he had forgotten to ask about what happened last night. He was just about to inquire when he suddenly didn't feel like asking anymore. Last night, he wanted to see Zhao Xian to discuss work matters, but Zhao Xian had been called to the bar by Song Ling instead. When the person who was asked to call Zhao Xian came back, he told Song Ling about the incident. Song Ling, not feeling at ease, had someone investigate the matter. Although they didn't find the reason, they learned about the news of Song Ling and Gu Dai's divorce. After being pushed out by Zhao Xian, Song Ling didn't have the most pleasant expression. He knew that Gu Dai wouldn't behave after their divorce. Not only did she get in touch with multiple men, but she also informed his grandfather about their divorce. Song Ling now thought that maybe Gu Dai's contact with those men was just a deliberate act for him to see, to make him jealous. The reason he didn't tell his grandfather about their divorce was that he was worried about his grandfather's health and didn't want him to be impacted. But Gu Dai apparently didn't care at all. The thought made Song Ling feel that Gu Dai was not only a scheming woman but also a thorough ingrate. Yet, even so, his grandfather still liked her very much. Song Ling couldn't understand what kind of love potion Gu Dai had given his grandfather. At this time, Gu Dai had already arrived at the entrance of the villa, and she felt a bit dazed looking at the familiar building in front of her. It had been a full 3 years since she last visited this place, so everything around her felt familiar yet incredibly unfamiliar at the same time. Sister, Su Ting looked at the dazed Gu Dai and gently called her, then said, I'm here. Su Ting's voice helped to bring Gu Dai back to reality. Her dazed eyes gradually regained focus. She looked up at Su Ting's face, and after a few seconds, she softly responded, MMHM. Gu Dai quickly recovered, thinking about the scene she would face later, her body filled with fighting spirit. She also didn't forget to tell Su Ting, I'm going in. Su Ting was still a little worried and couldn't help but ask, are you sure you don't need me to go with you? No need, I can handle this little matter myself. Just wait for me in the car. Gu Dai left these words and pushed open the villa door to enter. Even though she was prepared and knew that Gu Ming's family would make changes after moving in, seeing all the scenes different from her memories, Gu Dai couldn't help but lose her temper. The small garden designed by her father for her mother, the pavilion where her father used to linger when resting, and her favorite swing, among other things, were all gone. Now, everything was covered with various flashy designs. New money-style decoration became the theme of the entire villa. If it weren't for seeing Lu Min as soon as she entered the villa, Gu Dai really wouldn't have believed this was once her home. Gu Dai. Why did you come? Even though Lu Min already knew that Gu Dai wasn't dead, seeing someone who she thought was dead for 3 years suddenly appear in front of her, she couldn't help but feel startled. Gu Dai felt a little strange by Lu Min's question. She tilted her head, puzzled, and asked, isn't it normal for me to come back? After all, if I remember correctly, this is my home, not my aunt's, right? Lu Min's face turned pale, but she still managed to respond, you had an accident back then, and we all thought you were dead. It's a waste to leave the villa empty, otherwise, who would want to live here? Even though Gu Dai was very angry in her mind, she still spoke calmly, in that case, now that I'm back, you should move out and return the villa to me, right? After all, my parents bought this villa. Chapter 26. Fish had taken the bait. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Min became anxious after she heard what Gu Dai had said. Our family has been living here for 3 years, and you suddenly ask us to move out. Where will we live? Gu Dai, how could you be so heartless, wanting to make our family homeless? Gu Dai didn't expect that despite the fact that she hadn't even said anything yet, Lu Min was already accusing her. She was so angry that she actually started to laugh. Gu Dai spoke directly, so, Aunt, you think it's reasonable to live in my house? I'm not even pursuing the matter of you living in my house for 3 years, and in the end, I'm still called heartless. Gu Dai paused for a moment, then asked, so, Aunt, do you want me to pursue the matter? Lu Min was taken aback after hearing Gu Dai's words but quickly regained her senses, arguing, we're all relatives, do you have to be so distant? Besides, you're so wealthy and have taken back the company, do you really need to be so petty and want the house back? What's all the noise outside? Gu Ming angrily walked out of the house and shouted. Many people followed behind him, but they all came out with the intention of watching Gu Ming make a fool of himself. Having lost the company and his plan to transfer assets gone awry, Gu Ming had no choice but to invite those he once looked down upon to his home to discuss cooperation. However, Gu Ming didn't expect that these people, who once tried their best to suck up to him, to suddenly become arrogant and indifferent to him after learning of his plight. He was already feeling irritable and couldn't help but hear Lu Min's sharp voice from time to time. Lu Min was startled by Gu Ming's outburst and didn't dare to speak for a moment. However, she quickly regained her senses and recounted what had happened. Gu Ming looked at Gu Dai, who folded her arms across her chest, and angrily spoke at her, Gu Dai, don't you think you're going too far? Asking us to move out all of a sudden, we didn't prepare for this at all. But I heard that on the day I died, Uncle moved into the villa with your wife and children immediately. So does that mean you had been preparing to move in for a long time? Gu Dai's voice became colder as she spoke. Cold sweat broke out on Gu Ming's forehead. He grabbed Lu Min, who wanted to speak again, and cursed her in his heart as a stupid woman. If they told the truth, that they indeed had been preparing for a long time back then, even planning what and where to renovate. Wouldn't that reveal their ill intentions? Gu Dai was so smart that if she heard this, she would surely guess that her cruise accident was their doing. Gu Ming knew he must not admit to it now, so he clenched his teeth and said, of course not, we just didn't want to waste an empty house. As expected of a husband and wife, their words were the same. Gu Dai glanced at Gu Ming and Lu Min, but I remember there was a small house next to our villa. My parents bought it on a whim, but later found it useless and left it vacant. I wonder if my uncle and aunt felt it was too wasteful and moved in. Gu Ming felt relieved and then replied, we didn't live there, but we put things we don't use in that house, so it wasn't wasted. Good, since it wasn't wasted, why don't you move in there? Gu Dai didn't really care about Gu Ming's answer, she would say this anyway. Lu Min exploded in anger, that house is so small, and it's full of dust and clutter. How can we live there after you make us move? Gu Dai looked at Lu Min coldly, replying in a frosty tone, I don't think that's my concern, is it? Besides, isn't the dust and mess all caused by you? Lu Min was speechless, turned to Gu Ming for help, but he was now looking down at his phone. Angrily, she clenched her teeth and pinched him. Are you crazy? Gu Ming felt the pain and looked up from his phone to yell at Lu Min. Then he looked down at his phone again, making sure he hadn't seen it wrong, and couldn't help but let a smile escape his lips. Seeing this, Gu Dai knew the fish had taken the bait. Chapter 27. Kicked out. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Before Gu Dai came out, she had found the person who was helping Gu Ming transfer the company's funds. She promised him a generous reward as long as he cooperated with her in deceiving Gu Ming, and he agreed without hesitation. After all, the hacker knew that he was up against a legendary figure in their field, XY. Not only did she not hold a grudge against him for offending her last time, but she was also offering him a generous reward now. The money Gu Ming gave him was not even as much as the deposit Gu Dai paid. He would have to be foolish not to agree. After Gu Ming learned the news, he approached Lu Min and whispered to her, "I just got a message that the funds transfer overseas are working again. Let's go along with Gu Dai for now and not make her suspicious or let her investigate us." Upon Lu Min heard the good news, her eyes brightened. Her tone was no longer sharp and harsh, instead, she spoke gently to Gu Dai, "I'm sorry, Dai Dai, I was too emotional just now. We think the little house next door is quite nice. Your uncle and I will move there now." Lu Min began to instruct people to tidy up the house. However, Lu Min's expression turned critical again when she was delegating the servants. She pointed at the nearest person and said coldly, "You, help me clean up the house next door, and get a few others to move my things over." Seeing Lu Min's behavior, Gu Dai frowned. She was about to tell the person who had been called not to listen to Lu Min, but when she looked over, she was stunned. Gu Dai couldn't believe her eyes, exclaiming in shock, "Uncle Wu. Mississippi." Wu Zhen called Gu Dai softly, then quickly turned his head and wiped away the tears streaming down his face. Wu Zhen still looked familiar, but there were more wrinkles on his face, and his hands had calluses. How could there be such a big change in just 3 short years? Gu Dai couldn't believe it. Her fierce gaze fell on Gu Ming and Lu Min, demanding, "What is going on here?" Gu Ming and Lu Min were taken aback, and both were at a loss for words. Lu Min hesitated before saying, "Isn't the purpose of having servants to do some work?" Gu Dai gave Lu Min a cold glance and then said, "But Uncle Wu was specifically hired by my parents as a butler. I think he shouldn't have to do these tasks, and certainly not to the point of looking so worn and aged, right?" Gu Dai no longer wanted to waste words with Gu Ming and Lu Min, and directly told Wu Zhen, "Uncle Wu, now that I'm back, I won't let anyone bully you anymore." Gu Dai turned her fierce attitude at Gu Ming and his wife, "I think the two of you should be enough to clean up the house without seeking help from others, right?" Although Gu Dai was asking, her tone made it more of a statement. Gu Ming and Lu Min had enjoyed 3 years of comfort, and they were reluctant to clean up themselves. However, considering the news they had just learned, they had no choice but to endure it. With gloomy expressions and clenched teeth, Gu Ming and Lu Min still managed to put on a smile and say, "Of course, we have no problem. We can handle it." Gu Dai nodded and said, "That's good. Uncle and Aunt, hurry up and move your things. It's getting late." Outside the villa, Gu Ji's head was buried low, her expression sulky as she followed a group of girls, her fingers clenched tightly to the point where they turned pale due to extreme force she applied, cutting off the circulation of blood. In the past, she would always walk at the front, the center of everyone's attention. Now, just because her father's position as chairman had been taken away, everyone seemed to take the opportunity to step on her. "Gu Ji, why are you walking so slowly? Are you learning from a snail, No, maybe a snail is faster than you. Hurry up, or how will you introduce us to your home?" No, this definitely isn't your home anymore. I just received a message from my dad saying that your parents were kicked out and are now packing their bags. Right, I also got a message from my dad. The noisy voices all flowed into Gu Ji's ears, and she couldn't believe it. In anger, she shouted, "What are you talking about? How could my parents be kicked out?" Gu Ji, who had already felt humiliated in the crowd, couldn't imagine what the scene would be like if her parents were indeed kicked out. Gu Ji hurried back to the villa, only to find Su Ting at the entrance. She remembered her father had mentioned that he had made a bet with Gu Dai that if Gu Dai's jewelry project did not reach 500 million in pre-sales, she would give up her position as the company's chairman. Now that Su Ting appeared here, could it be that her father had reached an agreement with him? Chapter 28. The position of chairman. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Gu Ji thought of this possibility, she couldn't suppress her excitement in her mind, and her fingers even started to tremble. These past 2 days, not only did she fail to get money from Gu Ming, but she was also scolded. Just a moment ago, she was about to accompany the group of people who used to please her, but now looking down at her. However, now that her father was about to sign a deal with Su Ting, she could have the confidence to deal with these people who ridiculed her one by one. Gu Ji raised her chin arrogantly and looked at those who had just laughed at her, remembering them one by one. Then she snorted disdainfully and threatened, "My father is about to regain his position as chairman, and you dared to bully me just now. Just you wait." After Gu Ji threatened them, emotionless and cold, she turned around. When she saw Su Ting's figure, she revealed a bright smile and walked over with small, poised steps. "Hello, Mr. Su. I am Gu Ji, the daughter of the chairman of Gu Corporation. I've always liked you, and I even flew abroad to watch your show. You probably don't remember me, but that's okay. Once you work with my father, we'll have plenty of time to get to know each other." Towards the end, Gu Ji could hardly conceal the affection in her tone. Su Ting had been waiting in the car for a while, and Gu Dai hadn't come out yet. Feeling a little anxious, he got out of the car and decided to wait for another 5 minutes at the door. If Gu Dai still didn't show up, he would go in. However, he didn't expect that as soon as he got out, someone approached him and said a bunch of strange things. He didn't want to pay attention to her, but he suddenly thought of her mentioning her surname was Gu, and he deduced a possibility, which prompted him to ask indifferently, "What's your father's name?" Gu Ji's eyes shone brightly, and she proudly said, "My father's name is Gu Ming." "Oh," Su Ting responded, not taking the respond into mind. He was actually not very concerned. However, after he returned to the country, he learned that this Gu Ming seemed to be plotting for Gu Dai's company. And this girl named Gu Ji seemed to have misunderstood that he was signing a contract with Gu Ming. Su Ting didn't want to cause any misunderstandings, especially since he was supposed to sign a contract with Gu Dai. So, he wanted to clarify the situation. Just as Su Ting was about to explain, the villa's gate opened. Gu Dai came out, followed by Gu Ming and Lu Min. Su Ting's eyes brightened when he saw Gu Dai, and he hurriedly walked towards her. Gu Ji ran even faster, going directly to Gu Ming and Lu Min, excitedly exclaiming, "Dad, Su Ting is here to sign a contract with you." "What?" Gu Ming's eyes widened, and he exclaimed in shock. The things in his hands also fell to the ground with a clang. After Su Ting heard Gu Ji, he had a frown on his face and wanted to clarify the situation, but he saw Gu Dai shaking her head at him. He immediately understood and knew that she had other plans, so he did not explain for now. Gu Ming had indeed sent an invitation to Su Ting before, thinking that if he achieved a pre-sale amount of 500 million while Gu Dai did not, it would prove his exceptional ability. Although he had sent the invitation, he never expected Su Ting to actually agree. With this thought in his mind, Gu Ming was so excited that he forgot to verify the truth and looked at Gu Dai with disdain. "With Su Ting's help, the jewelry project will surely reach 500 million. However, since I invited him, it can't be counted towards your achievements." Gu Dai calmly nodded and replied, "Oh, is that so?" When Gu Ming saw Gu Dai's calm demeanor, he became anxious. He quickly took out his phone, played the recording from the company, and said, "Don't forget, we recorded everything. The evidence is right here. You can't go back on your word." "Of course, I won't go back on my word, especially since you've already played the recording, and so many people have witnessed it. Even if I want to back out later, with so many witnesses, I probably won't have a chance, right?" Gu Dai glanced at the people around as she said. Gu Ming also realized that she was right. Yes, there are so many witnesses present. Chapter 29. Pulled back. You are listening at novelfull.audio. However, the people around them seemed to back away when they heard Gu Dai's words. After all, they did not forget the fact that they had just ridiculed Gu Ming. If he were to become the chairman again, their days would definitely be numbered. They looked at each other and unanimously agreed that even if they had heard it, they would pretend they hadn't. Since everyone else thought about this, Gu Ming obviously did too, and to prevent such a situation from happening, he spoke loudly, "Everyone, rest assured. Don't worry that I, Gu Ming, will not seek revenge. Once I regain the chairman's position, I will definitely work with all of you." As his speech concluded, a round of cheers erupted. Gu Ji was dissatisfied by Gu Ming's words. She subconsciously wanted to refute it, because she had prepared to take revenge on those who had bullied her once her father regained the chairman's position. Seeing Gu Ji's expression, Gu Ming knew what she was about to say and let out a long sigh in frustration. He couldn't understand how such a smart person like him could have such a foolish child. To prevent Gu Ji from disrupting his plans, Gu Ming had to walk to her side and whisper, "First, let's calm them first. Once I regain the chairman's position, you can take your revenge then, all right." Gu Ji's eyes lit up, and she hurriedly agreed, "Okay." Lu Min, who was standing nearby, also understood. Gu Ming could now regain the chairman's position, and because of this, she threw the things she had originally packed on the ground. She arrogantly said, "We don't want the villa anymore, and we don't want these things either. We've worn them several times before. You can just treat whatever we have as garbage." Gu Dai was not upset. She slightly nodded to Wu Zhen and said, "Uncle Wu, since Aunt Lu doesn't want these things, find some people to dispose them." "Yes, Mississippi." Wu Zhen complied and immediately went to get someone to handle this matter. Lu Min initially just wanted to vent her frustrations, but she didn't expect Gu Dai to really take her words literally. For a moment, she felt heartache, but she quickly comforted herself. Once Gu Ming secured the chairman's position later, she could buy as many things as she wanted, so there was no need to worry about these trivial matters. Gu Ming didn't say anything about Lu Min's behavior. He was rubbing his hands together and looking at Su Ting with an expectant gaze, trying to please him by saying, "Mr. Su, shall we sign the contract now?" At this moment, Su Ting received a signal from the look in Gu Dai's eyes. He then spoke up, "I'm sorry, but I'm not here to sign a contract with you. I came to see Miss Gu Dai, and I hope to sign a jewelry endorsement contract with your company." As Su Ting explained, he looked intently at Gu Dai, and then softly asked, "Sister, can I take on this endorsement project?" When the others heard Su Ting's words, they were all shocked. After all, who in this circle didn't know that it was difficult for Su Ting to accept endorsements? Yet now, not only did he take the initiative to accept, but he also asked the other party. Gu Dai, the person involved, was also stunned when she heard Su Ting's words. She then met Su Ting's expectant gaze. Her heart trembled under his gaze, and she quickly replied, "Of course you can." Su Ting smiled. Was like a blooming spring flower, so beautiful and charming that it caught everyone's attention. However, compared to the pleasant atmosphere between Gu Dai and Su Ting, Gu Ming's side was feeling exceptionally gloomy. Gu Ming felt like he had just been played like a clown by Su Ting, and he could already feel the mocking gazes of the people around him. Gu Ming's face turned dark, and he clenched his fists, glaring at Su Ting fiercely before questioning, "If you came to see Gu Dai, why didn't you interrupt us when we were talking?" Su Ting was not afraid in Gu Ming's fierce gaze, he confronted him directly. He was about to retort, but he didn't expect that just as he was about to speak, he was pulled back a pair of soft hands. Su Ting was dumbfounded, staring blankly at Gu Dai. Chapter 30. Unwilling. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Su Ting quickly came to his senses, realizing that Gu Dai wanted to speak up for him. Once he realized this, he felt a stream of warmth flowing inside him. However, he felt that he could handle the current situation. So, Su Ting softly said to Gu Dai, "Don't worry about me, I can handle it." Gu Dai nodded and didn't say anything more to stop him. "I didn't want to explain earlier because at the villa entrance, your daughter spoke a bunch of random things to me. Then when the door opened, you all started talking without giving me a chance to explain. At this point, Su Ting spoke with righteous indignation, as if he had been greatly wronged. Yes, 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 we saw that Gu Ji suddenly went over and kept talking to Su Ting non-stop, a member of the sisterhood said. As one person spoke up, others chimed in. After all, they had seen Gu Ji's disdainful contempt for them just now and couldn't help but to take advantage of the situation. Gu Ji didn't expect the situation to turn like this. She was so enraged that her face turned red. Just moments ago, the situation was completely different. If Gu Dai hadn't returned, her father would still be the company's chairman, and she wouldn't be ridiculed. Gu Ji glared viciously at Gu Dai, who was standing next to Su Ting, and shouted angrily, "Gu Dai, why didn't you die on that cruise ship 3 years ago?" With Gu Ji's words, Su Ting's gaze became fierce. He wanted to step forward and deal with Gu Ji, but Gu Dai held him back. Sensing this, he realized that his sister must have other plans, so he could only control his anger for the moment. Although Su Ting didn't step forward, Gu Ji was still slapped in the face. The sound of the slap was particularly loud. Lu Min screamed with disbelief in her tone, "Gu Ming, why did you hit Gigi?" Gu Ji felt the burning pain on her face, and her head buzzed from the slap. Dazed, she raised her hand to cover her face, staring blankly at Gu Ming without saying a word. Gu Ming's face was full of coldness, and he didn't bother to argue with Lu Min, just glaring at her. Lu Min immediately calmed down when she met with Gu Ming's chilling gaze. She remembered the information she had received in the villa, that the Gu family's assets were currently being transferred overseas, and they couldn't afford to offend Gu Dai right now. Especially since Gu Ming's position as chairman was now a pipe dream. Lu Min could only grit her teeth and bear the situation. Gu Ming hurriedly said to Gu Dai, "Gu Ji is still young and doesn't understand. Don't take her words to heart." Gu Dai lightly chuckled at her words, just a few months older than me." Gu Dai continued to speak, as she didn't want their relationship to become strained now. "But she's been spoiled by Uncle, you, so it's not surprising that she's willful. I won't hold it against her this time. However, shouldn't she apologize to me?" Gu Ming's face instantly stiffened. When Gu Dai said that Gu Ji was willful because she was spoiled, she implied that he didn't know how to educate his children, causing her to become like this. However, no matter how angry Gu Ming was now, he couldn't say it out loud, and it wasn't the time to discuss this issue. Because Gu Dai was looking at him, waiting for him to take action. In order to buy time to transfer the funds overseas, Gu Ming chose to endure and coldly told Gu Ji, "Apologize." Gu Ji didn't want to apologize, and sobbed, "I won't apologize." Lu Min acted as she quickly comforted Gu Ji and led her to apologize. She grabbed Gu Ji's neck, forcing her to bow and say, "Apologize quickly." Being forced, Gu Ji had no choice but to say, "I'm sorry." However, when Gu Ji said this, her voice was full of reluctance, and it was exceptionally quiet. Gu Dai wasn't angry by her action, but she just smiled and said, "Gu Ji seems a bit unwilling. I don't accept forced apologies. She's willing, of course she's willing." Gu Ming hurriedly spoke up while he stared Gu Ji with a threatening look in his eyes.